People have forgotten that Tennessee built Texas. Davy Crockett, Tennessean. Sam Houston, Tennessean. The Alamo should just be called Mexican Neeland. Texas is only Texas because Tennessee went down there and saved their asses. And honestly, not much has changed. Now, Tennessee baseball arrived once again to help Texas, this time by teaching them a little lesson in humility. Jim Schlossnagel must secretly be a Vols fan because he suddenly comes down with a terminal illness every time he faces the boys in orange. He's got the same terminal diagnosis that we all share. This is the Volatile Podcast. I'm Mac Williams. These are two of my very best friends, Nick Duncan and Jeff Wright. Jeff, how are we doing tonight, bud?
That was art. Your introductions have been a true art form. My conscience is slightly offended by all your vulgar language, but other than that, it's just like watching a Renaissance painter do their thing in real time, man.
You can talk to my pastor about it.
I will. I'll follow up with him quick.
All right. Nick, how you doing, bud?
I am euphoric. That was wonderful. It reminded me of all the joy that I had this last weekend, and I'm not offended by your vulgarity because Texas deserves it. If it wasn't for Tennessee, there'd be no Texas.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mexican Neeland was a personal favorite of mine. When I was writing that, I was laughing because first I was like Neeland West, but then I was like, but that's Vanderbilt, so I had to go even more west,
Of course.
So,
hold on real quick. Can I let listeners in behind the curtain just a little bit? So last episode, Mac's volume blew out the microphone. And so we spent 20 minutes trying to fix his audio this time. And at one point I was like, hey, if you're going to be lean forward and loud, you probably need to turn your input down a little bit. And he said, no, man, I tend to do it from back here. That whole intro was right here. And
you like that banjo, Texas? You like that banjo?
Well, just for the intro, I like to be forwards. Now I lean back. The intro, I'm like, I'm feeling
he's into it. Yeah, you're feeling it.
Look at your audio levels, dude. Your microphone is like, mercy, uncle.
Well, the listeners love it. They've been complimenting me. They've just been talking about how much
love the intros. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I've heard. That's just limitless feedback of positivity.
Yeah, they come for the intros and stay for the substance.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and jump into the latest news, boys. We got football news, sort of. Really not anything Tennessee specific in the football category, but we do have two topics we wanted to touch on. We'll start with Jeff. You sent an important email yesterday regarding the state of college football. You want to share with our listeners kind of what you said and who you said it to?
Yeah, I would say that I wish it was as important as an email, but I just sent a DM.
A DM. Sorry, I meant
I wish I had Josh Pate's email address. I would use those powers for good, as I am now planning to use all my powers for good, as we'll talk about later. I sent him a DM that he will never read, and as of today, like 48 hours later, he has not read. So I know I'm on the right track with that. But I was listening to VolQuest, and they were talking about the expansion of the playoff in college football. And they said, the coaches have come out and said what they want. The commissioners are going to say what they want to have happen. And it just dawned on me, why is there no fan collective to say, hey, we're not boosters, but we pay a substantial amount of the money that goes into the pie. You guys are all spending. You guys are all divvying up. And so I sent an email to Josh, or a DM there. I said it, email. I sent a DM to Josh Pate, and I said, look, man, you want to be the commissioner of college football. What would be a great idea is if you would organize sort of a fans' voice collective. And I have no imagination that he wants to organize something. But if you're familiar with Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk, a system where you had a chapter of, let's call it College Football Fans United, right? If you had Fans United at UT and all the SEC schools and all the Big Ten schools, and they were saying, we've got a local chapter, we've spoken to the national guy, Josh Pate, here's what we would like to see with the sport, here's where our frustrations are, it would at least give fans a voice at the table in some way. right? When people speak on behalf of large groups, they just got a much better chance of being heard. And I wish somebody would organize something like that. Now, the downside, and this is probably why it'll never happen, is someone would have to have the power to kind of in a way that labor unions work, say, if y'all go forward with this, we're committing that we're not buying any merchandise for this coming whatever.
Well, and we're not going to watch, right? Because you were saying the fans are a substantial part of their income. It's really all of their income because most of their income comes from their TV deals, and that's because we watch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, there would have to be a willingness at some point to kind of play not nice, which is probably why it would never happen. And it would be hard to get fans who care enough to be involved in something like that to then sacrifice the element that makes them care, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, fans should have some kind of representation. They just should. And we have none at all. It's like the elites on high descend from Olympus and say, this is how you will get to enjoy college football, plebe, and you'd better like it. And I'm just kind of sick of watching that happen.
We need some kind of quippy slogan like the Patriots had during the Revolution, like no taxation without representation. We need something like no expansion without, I don't know. We'll have to work on that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I volunteer to lead the Knoxville chapter, and my first platform position will be Danny White gets ran out on a rail.
We are less than 7 minutes in, and Jeff has already thrown down his first Danny White diss on the podcast. That's how you know you're at the bottom.
I would like to know if that's a record or not.
We'll take Danny White on a rail out and throw him on top of Tim Banks, wherever Tim Banks is.
I'm going to use AI to see if AI can pick apart our episodes and see what's the earliest that Jeff Wright has ever mentioned Danny White in a podcast.
Dude, I think 7 minutes is too late. It's usually in the first 3 to 4, I would guess.
Do not challenge me on this because I'll be interrupting your wonderful intros.
The intro.
I could be like, y'all ready? And as soon as I see that timer.
Oh, my gosh.
Fire Danny White. Fire Danny White.
So anyway, organize a fan collective. Give us a voice. Somebody do that.
Yeah, Jeff, I thought when you told me that, I told us that, I thought that was a great idea. I mean, it just makes sense, right? I mean, college football fans are truly the thing that drives the sport, I mean, and that's why also, I know I'm a little bit bigger on Pate than you guys are, but Josh Pate is also the perfect candidate for this, not just because of his platform, but because he also agrees. He agrees that college football, the culture specifically built by the fans and by their passion and all that stuff is what has made the sport great and what makes it the best sport in the world.
Well, obviously he's a media guy now, but ultimately he really is a fan. He's just a fan who's very knowledgeable about the game. Yeah. He's kind of like the voice of the people already in a sense. So and he's not bought by any media outlets or anything like that. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he really would just be the perfect candidate for it. And I do unfortunately, it just feels like it's a pipe dream, but it is something that is logical and I think could have an impact if someone could get it going.
Yeah, that's maybe the most aggravating part of it. He's perfect. It's an idea that needs to happen, and thus it probably won't.
Yeah. Other football news that we talked about, and Nick, I'll kind of turn this over to you quickly because you know the most, but there's been a lot of Lane Kiffin drama in the last handful of days. Nick, why don't you fill in our listeners who might not know about this, and then we'll talk about it.
Always happy to fill everybody in on the Lane Kiffin drama. The guy, you always want to hear the dirt on the guy that left you at the altar, I suppose, and how he's doing 15 years later. So Lane Kiffin did an interview with Vanity Fair. And my understanding is this was kind of after Trinidad Chambliss had done an interview that was very obviously pro Ole Miss because that's his school. And in the interview, one of the things that Lane, it's kind of become the talking point of the interview is he was talking about how much easier it is to recruit to LSU over Ole Miss because recruits were always asking about the racist connotations that come along with Ole Miss and them being the rebels and, being the state of Mississippi and all that. And and frankly, he's just spent the whole week getting flamed by like everybody, like even LSU fans. There have been LSU fans that have been flaming him over that. So it just seems like it's something that has that everybody has seen as kind of cringy, and he has denied that it was a tactic to recruit people to LSU away from Ole Miss, but college football coaches are way too calculated for that, especially Lane Kiffin, someone who's basically lives on Twitter and social media, and so he's just too smart for that. So it's just been fun to watch him get flamed. I think it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, I do understand that. I'm sure he has had questions about when he was the head coach at Ole Miss about Confederate connotations with the rebels and things like that. I mean, they used to have Colonel Reb was their mascot for a long time, and then probably about 15 years ago they changed it to a black bear. But people have gone out of their way to point out. A lot of people know, it's pretty common knowledge that like it's not as on the nose, but the LSU Tigers were kind of named after a rough unit that fought in the Confederacy from Louisiana, and it's something that, of course, if like us, we grow up in the South, like in the SEC, like there's just always a little bit of that tension there. And being Tennessee fans, it was always a big deal when Connor Holloway was like, I think the first black quarterback in the SEC to start, and then T. Martin was the first black quarterback to win a national championship. So, those are not new storylines for the SEC, and so the fact that he's trying to weaponize that to make it seem like Ole Miss is somehow like way more racist than anywhere else in the country, particularly Louisiana, is just, I find, very comical. And Pete Golding, who, I don't know much about Pete Golding other than, didn't like him.
He's a Bama boy.
He's from Bama. Obviously don't like him because of that, but he's had some good quips coming back. And the Oxford Police Department had a hilarious tweet about it today, because they announced when LSU and Ole Miss will be playing, and they put a GIF out from The Office. It's like, yay! So
it's a night game, right?
It's a night
Everybody's
game.
going to spend the day drinking, and then
it's just going to be rowdy. So I'm totally here for that. I hope Tennessee is not playing someone at the same time of that game, because that'll be a good one to catch just for being a college football fan. So that's kind of just the drama. Not much to do with Tennessee except for the fact that he's not a very well received man in our state. So
and then also you mentioned Ole Miss enrollment as far as like black students. You said it was the highest.
Yeah, I saw a stat. It's like 18% of the students at Ole Miss are black, which is the highest in the SEC by like 5%, based on the stats I saw. And Sarkisian actually got in on it a little bit too. I don't know if it was intentional, but Sark said something about talking about Pete Golding recruiting to Ole Miss, and was throwing shade about how Texas's academic standards are so high, and at Ole Miss you can just get a degree in like underwater basket weaving.
It's so funny how.
So there are AI pictures of Pete Golding basket weaving, and it's like Pete getting ready to recruit for next year. I mean, it's college football Twitter is great this week. It's so good.
It's so funny how underwater basket weaving has become like the go-to, like colloquial joke of a major.
Yeah. And there's an AI where like Arch Manning is leading into Sark's ear, and he's like, my uncle and my dad and my grandpa all graduated from Ole Miss. Like,
that's so funny.
There's been some good stuff. So Ole Miss is getting flamed, but they are coming out looking nice and rosy, I think.
My favorite meme is somebody photoshopped Lane Kiffin into Rosa Parks' position on the bus.
Oh, grief.
It was really great. I just want to say that I do appreciate Lane Kiffin's moral courage now that he's no longer at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Ole Miss.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the kind of courage that Lane Kiffin has. Yeah.
I told you guys before we hit record, there was always sort of a begrudging respect for Lane Kiffin as kind of a troll. Mm-hmm. It honestly, it's shades of Spurrier. Like you hated Spurrier, but he knew how to land a verbal dig. He was just good at it. And Lane seemed to have that energy for a while, but this feels desperate. In fact, the way that it's ramped up from the T. Martin clip that he put a month ago or so on, it just seems like Lane has become desperate to. It's not just grab attention. There's something about it that's like pitiful in that he seems to be thinking he has to do stuff like this to help his program. And it's just transitioned from like begrudging respect to just cringy. I don't want to see this stuff anymore. Like, could you just get it away because it's weird and gross?
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like the trash talk side of being a young, and that's the thing, like Lane Kiffin was kind of always seen, and even still is seen as kind of like the young, charismatic, coach who's willing to like put his name out there and like say whatever. And so like you said, you kind of had like this level of respect for like it's kind of cool that he doesn't care. But now it's kind of like he's too old to like actually say the like modern lingo, and so he's still trying to do this whole like, I'm one of the cool kids, I can say this or that, and I can get away with it because I'm Lane Kiffin. But it's like he's outdated now. It's just like it's worn on you for so long that now it's like everything he says is just kind of like old. Like he's past his prime in trash talk. I don't know, maybe that's not how you guys feel, but I don't know, it just feels
He
like
just goes to the well so often too.
right.
Right. There's a little bit of quality that comes from like every now and then, but he's just again, I can't figure out a better term than desperation.
Yeah,
And he comes off as desperate.
Yeah, and it looks even worse to me when like obviously he took Ole Miss to the college football playoff this year, but he's still yet to coach a team in the college football playoff as a head coach. Like he still hasn't really like reached. I mean, he's always improved upon every program he's been at, I would say, with maybe the exception of USC. But I don't know. He's a coach that you feel like could do that. Like I don't think anyone's going to be shocked if Lane Kiffin ends up winning a national championship at LSU in the NIL era. But it just also seems kind of cringy to me when it's like it really doesn't feel like you've done enough to just keep talking like this.
Yeah.
Well, and even the Vanity Fair thing is not him trying to land an elbow in the ribs. Like that's him. That's his version of like a think piece.
Right.
And dude, nobody wants Lane Kiffin doing think pieces with serious journalistic overtones. I mean,
as reflected by the backlash this week, like it's been brutal, and I'm just here for all of it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. So one more thing on Lane Kiffin before we move on. Joe said this week that he thinks Lane Kiffin, and Joe's always kind of said this, that he thinks Lane Kiffin's like the most overrated coach. I don't know if he would say in the SEC or in the country or in college football. I don't know like how he would phrase it, but Nick, I feel like you and I have agreed on this in the past that we don't agree with that. Where are you guys at with that now? Do you guys feel like Lane Kiffin's like kind of one of the most overrated coaches out there, or no?
I don't think he's overrated. I mean, I think he's probably appropriately rated. I think he should also speak in accordance with what he's been able to accomplish. It seems like he wants to talk like, I mean, Nick Saban didn't even dig really that often at other teams like that, but he just wants to have that kind of respect and has that kind of bravado and doesn't really feel like he's earned some of that. But I would never say like LSU has overrated him by paying him what they're paying him. I mean, I think he's one of there aren't that many active coaches even left that have like won national championships. Right. So like outside, if you want to assume all those guys are in the top tier, he's probably at the top of that next tier, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's overrated because I think the book on Kiffin is he'll be really competitive and not win the big one. I think that's kind of the consensus on him. I think he's got the potential to win the big one. I think LSU is probably ideal for that. But I think most people see him as second tier, and that sounds right. When you say overrated, I thought the question was going to be, who do you think is the most overrated? and immediately Sarkisian came to my mind. That's a
Yeah, I
guy
think
that I
Sark.
think,
I think Sark is more overrated than Kiffin.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? It's like Sark is at Texas. Is this year 5 for Sark at Texas? It's around that if it's not that.
I think he's the same as Heupel. They're in the same class, I think.
Okay, so that would be this would be year 5 for Heupel. So that would be the same for him. So if that's true, if it's year 5, you think about Sark having Texas resources for 5 years and not being able to win. Lane Kiffin has not had Texas resources ever in his career. I mean, maybe USC back then, but like even that is
Well,
different
but at
than SEC
USC, they were
football.
dealing when he was at USC. They were dealing with fallout from like
Yep, the Reggie Bush being
illegal
thorough. Yeah,
recruiting, Reggie Bush. Like, so it probably
Mhm.
wasn't even peak USC. Sark was at USC and had more resources there than Kiffin did, and still
yeah,
didn't win.
right, right.
Nobody's in Texas's tier financially. I don't know if you saw the numbers. We're number 2, and it was still like $20 million difference. Texas is
Mhm.
just on a whole nother level.
And
Yeah.
not to get Jeff off on Danny White again, but like Danny White's trying to use the money to make us an everything school, and that ain't the case at Texas.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, so I think Sark is definitely a good answer to that question, and probably a more appropriate answer than Lane Kiffin in terms of overratedness. Yeah, I think that's a good conversation. I think we can move on if y'all are good to basketball. So only really one basketball note, unless y'all have something else, and that was the quote from Juke Harris this week. Nick, you kind of shared this with us. I kind of paraphrased the quote to make it a little more understandable. And so the quote says, it says, I got so much love on social media before I even announced I was coming to Tennessee from all the Vol fans. So I'm super ready to play in front of you guys, and it's going to be a big show. This was Juke's quote. Nick, since you shared it with us, why don't you lead? What did that make you feel? What did it do for you?
Yeah, I shared that because I got excited about it. Obviously, players are probably supposed to say that kind of stuff, but he's obviously the crown jewel of this all these transfers that have come in, and was kind of probably the biggest like threshold guy on like NBA versus coming back to college. Like we talked about it, even our own Nate Ament, but Nate Ament was higher in that tier of like probably going to the NBA. Juke was definitely more like on the fence, and I think he was the number 1 transfer recruit. And so, if he just backs up that kind of language and wants to put on a show with all the talent that Barnes brought in this year, you never know with a guy like that. Not knowing him a lot, is it going to be, something where he's just trying to get a payout and go, and bide his time and go to the NBA? But that made me feel a little more comfortable that like, yeah, maybe he's going to come here and give it his all. And, so I just thought it's a basic quote. There's not a lot there, but it just got me a little excited.
2 things on basketball just to note. Nobody watches the NBA, but Jacoby Gillespie had his first game in the summer league, I'm guessing, the draft combine. He had 28 points, was 10 for 17 from the floor, and had 5 steals.
Nice.
And I saw it in my Vols feed because the NBA guys were tweeting about it. So I don't know if that portends anything for him, but good on the kid. I hope he improves his draft stock a little bit.
Yeah, me too. That's a good note. Thanks, Jeff, for sharing that. Yeah, that's awesome.
How many turnovers did he have in the last 3 minutes of the game?
We don't talk about Bruno.
Hey, you shut your mouth.
What he said. Those days don't haunt us anymore, Nick. They don't hurt us anymore.
I feel every scar. They never leave. They're everywhere.
This may be more relevant to next year. Who knows? But 5 hours ago, there were reports that Tennessee had brought in VCU transfer Christian Furman for an on-campus visit. 6'10", 225-pound forward. He appeared in only 4 games last year due to taking a leave of absence during the season. But when he did play, he averaged 4 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 block on 55% shooting from the field. He was teammates with Terrence Hill Jr. at VCU. So we may have our final roster spot guy on campus.
Why did he take a leave of absence? What does that even mean?
He stepped on a helmet.
You can't do that while I'm about to drink water. I'll destroy my computer.
Why does anyone do anything in college athletics anymore?
When you said
that would
VCU,
scare me more if it was the football team, but Rick Barnes don't put up with that stuff. So if he wants to take another leave of absence, it'll be indefinite. So
yeah, correct. Yeah, Rick Barnes does give you a peace of mind regarding locker room issues that, frankly, no other coach on campus gives you.
That's true.
So, yeah. So, Jeff, what did you think about Juke's quote? I mean, anything to add to what Nick said?
No, I mean, he's setting high expectations for himself, but I kind of want that. I mean,
right.
Again, I don't know if the rumors are true, but everything that was floated around was $5 million. So, whatever you need to get yourself motivated, whatever you need to do to say thanks to the fans who makes that happen. Man, lean into that. Just give us a good return on our investment.
Yeah. I mean, and it definitely could just be talk, like Nick said, like it's probably stuff he's supposed to say. But I mean, we all agree, and like Zakiya Ziegler would probably be the first person to tell you, like the support from Vol Nation for guys that play basketball, even though we're not like an elite blue blood program in basketball, is different than at other programs. And that just speaks to how, great Vol Nation is and how passionate the fans are. And so the fact that you're starting off your career at Tennessee acknowledging that, I think, is a good step. Even if it's just optics, it's the right thing to say. So that's good.
Well, you had a lot of guys transferring out who didn't say something like that. And so, this is a net positive. Like, it makes me a little bit more in on him as a VFL potentially,
Yeah. I have one. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit before we go to baseball. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but your helmet comment made me briefly relive the last 20 years of Tennessee football all in an instant.
Oh no!
And it reminded me that Derek Dooley is running for Senate in Georgia as a conservative. So I just thought I would note that.
I bet it's going great.
I heard that today. No shot in Tennessee.
No.
Doesn't matter what his politics are. But in Georgia, he's probably got a shot.
Yeah, probably so.
So just thought I would note that.
I'm looking this up while y'all talking about baseball.
That's what he's doing these days. So someone texted me that today. I cannot confirm that. So
yeah, I'm looking this up. Y'all talk about baseball because I know nothing about the sport.
Well, we'll move on to baseball latest news. Baseball latest news is that Tennessee beats Texas on Friday and Saturday to win the series this past weekend. The Vols will travel to Oklahoma tomorrow night to face the Sooners for the final series of the regular season. That, again, is a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, so we'll talk about that near the end of the show. And then the last bit of news is that the SEC baseball tournament starts on Tuesday. That's this coming Tuesday, May 19th. So we'll kind of preview that and talk about that as well. Let's go ahead and just step on into baseball. Let's talk about Friday night. So Friday night, Tennessee gets the win 5-1 at home against Texas. This was obviously and clearly Tegan Kuhn's best start of the season. He had 15 Ks and went 7 innings. Nick, go ahead.
Oh, Kuhn's was him. I mean, guy was unconscious. He was. I mean, it felt like Vitello pitchers. Every time he'd come off the field, he's just talking a little trash, and he just knew what he had. He knew what he had that night, and and they couldn't hit it. I mean, it was awesome. I was almost excited that my prediction was almost there. I said 7 2/3, but he went 7. I will totally take it. I mean,
if you would have said in that same kind of scenario laid out, Tegan Kuhn's goes 7. My reaction probably would have been about the same. So for all intents and purposes, it's crazy that he went 7 innings against the number 4 team in the country. I definitely was not expecting that. And I think
me neither.
What's even crazier is not just the length, because, had you told me he's going to go 7, that necessarily wouldn't have surprised me in itself. But the fact that he had 15 strikeouts against a team like Texas is insane.
Yep. Yeah, you're honestly probably thinking if he went 7, they were probably up, and they were just like, we can't waste the bullpen, so just leave him out there.
Exactly. Yeah, Jeff.
Did y'all see that he's questionable for this weekend with general arm soreness?
Yeah, so I want to come back to that. Don't let me forget, but I have a theory.
Yeah, me too.
So
A little extra rest.
uh, we'll come back to it, Jeffrey.
How about now? Okay.
Yeah,
He did throw like 115 pitches.
I'm
So
trying to learn baseball. So how about now?
yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I
No,
don't
no,
care.
I'm
It's not.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
I know
kidding.
you are,
Carry
but
on.
I really don't mind either. We can talk about it. So yeah,
Let's
I
not.
mean, not.
Okay, let's do.
You're such a tease, Jeffrey.
It's your world. We're just living in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that you're walking into a series that is, I mean, naturally, it was, even if it was, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're walking into a series where you only have to win one game, really.
well, and
And
can I pause you right there and give a little
yeah,
more color to this? I
sure.
have read multiple analysts this week say that since Tennessee beat Texas 2 out of 3, they don't even need to win one against Oklahoma now. But I still think that I would, obviously, we're all going to feel much better if they win at least one. But I
Yeah.
think it adds to the weight of where I think you're going.
Yes. So going back there, so you're going into a series where you only need to win one or none games. And in addition to that, this series is taking place on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So he's getting one day less of rest than usual, anyways. The series doesn't have as much weight to it as maybe it did when you thought you were only going to win one game at Texas at best. Um, and also, he did, as Nick already mentioned, he did go a full 7. He threw 115 pitches, which is, not a crazy number for a starter of his caliber, but is definitely different than what he's been doing in this season so far. And so I would imagine that is totally precautionary and is more strategic on Elander's part than it is an actual issue of concern for Teagan's health, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Jeff. So Friday night, I mean, really, is there anything else to talk about on Friday other than how good Coons was? I mean, the offense scored 5 runs. They hit the ball fine, but it wasn't like
it's okay. Yeah.
right. It wasn't like
No.
an amazing offensive night. We didn't, and not that this is everything, but as a Tennessee, baseball fan, you come to think of like, well, how many home runs do we hit? There wasn't a home run on Friday night. I think Grinlinger had a double, and maybe Manny Marin had a double as well. But those are your only extra base hits, was a couple doubles. Other than that, everyone, we were just kind of scoring runs, the old fashioned way, if you will. And so the offense was fine, but really, other than how good Coons was, I thought that was obviously the headline. And then something else that we'll talk about, I don't want to necessarily dive into it now, but it's that Elander chose to throw Arvidsson paired with Coons instead of Appenzeller. And so we're going to talk more about that later. But I don't think that was necessarily unexpected because Arvidsson has been better than Appenzeller the past 2 weekends at least.
Yep.
But it was something of note that I think matters more about Appenzeller than it does about Arvidsson, which we could talk about. Anything else other than that from Friday?
All Coons all the time.
That's right. So Saturday, this was the I think one that was a huge surprise because if you had said like, "Hey, Tennessee wins Friday night because Coons is out of his mind," I'd have been like, "Wow, that's awesome." Wasn't necessarily expecting it, but makes sense.
Makes sense. Seems feasible.
Yeah, seems feasible. Saturday, you could not have paid me to think this was going to happen. Tennessee wins this game 14-9, and the game was much less close than the score represents.
Yes.
And so
didn't Tennessee come back from down?
Yeah,
they were down 4, and then going into that last inning, it was like down 3, and going into the last inning, they were up like 14-5 or 14-6. Like it was,
Yep. So I think the first question I had here was this the most impressive win of the season?
I think
Jeff?
it's yes. I think it's not close.
Top to bottom, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the thing that made it so impressive was the fact that, as you already mentioned, we were down 3-0. Texas scored 3 in the top of the first inning. They came out, hit the ball well, scored 3 on Evan Blanco. And then the offense responded pretty much immediately. Garrett Wright hits a solo shot in the first.
My guy.
And Tennessee responds, ties the game at 3. And what the craziest thing about the offense was that they scored at least 1 run in all 8 innings that they got a chance to hit. They didn't hit in the bottom of the 9th, obviously, because they won the game. So in all 8 innings, Tennessee scored at least 1 run. So there was not an inning that they didn't score. And they hung a crooked number in 5 of the 8 innings that they hit. So that means they scored more than 1 in 5 of those innings. The reason, though, I think this is the most impressive one of the season, not just who your opponent was, but because the consistent issue that we've had with this team, other than the bullpen, has been the ability to score runs, in situational hitting or even just generally, like being able to score double-digit runs against SEC teams has not been something this team does often. And the fact that you did it against a team like Texas was really impressive, I thought.
Man,
I don't know what to add into that.
Nothing to add to that. That was perfect. That's absolutely
Awesome.
right.
I'm just going to interject here real quick. Every Vol podcast that I subscribe to is kind of an auto download for me. The only time I don't is when Locked On Vols leads with a Lady Vols story. And I just kind of, swap that out of the inbox. I've quit listening to baseball podcasts because you guys are better at it. I'm not, but you guys are better at it. I feel like y'all give better analysis. It's just kind of ruined me on all the other guys. So good job, guys. Keep it up.
That's nice, Jeff.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
Yeah, I'll say, I think the best Vols podcast, other than the Volatile podcast, of course, in terms of baseball, is what 24/7 does. I think Ben McKee and Will do a pretty good job, and mainly Will Heflin.
I was about to say the same thing. I really enjoy listening to Will.
Yeah, he does a great job, which is obviously no surprise. I mean, he played at UT, he played for Vitello. Of course, he's got good insight and he knows the game well. But yeah, I really genuinely believe that they do a much better job, and frankly, we do a better job than the VolQuest guys do about baseball. I still listen to what they have to say, but when Eric Kane is on the baseball podcast, it's not even worth listening to.
Oh, really?
I think.
Yeah.
So I think you got the stature to say that.
Yeah. Next thing. Oh, thanks, Jeff. I think next thing for Saturday is Appenzeller, right? So that's the big story from this weekend. Is if you had to take something away that was maybe negative or maybe something that's concerning, is Appenzeller, how he's looked the past few weekends, specifically on Saturday. Nick, you posed this question, so I'll ask it and I'll let you answer it. With Elander knowing that Landon Mack was going to be out for Sunday before the Saturday game. So, before we go into Saturday, he knows Landon Mack's not going to throw Sunday.
Yep.
And the fact that UT had a big lead in that game, do you think it was smart to throw Appenzeller late on Saturday, or should he have saved him to start on Sunday? What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think with it being 14 to – especially with that, he came in immediately in the 8th, right? What was the score when he came in? Is there a way to know that quickly off the top of our heads?
You start talking and I'll have it.
So assuming that Tennessee was up by, while you're looking that up, let's assume Tennessee was up by more than 5, then I kind of feel like it's that scenario that we talked about last week. If Tennessee was up by more than 5 going into the 8th, then I may have tried to save Appenzeller. I probably would have. I would have probably tried to throw him on Sunday. Of course, the big thing is you have a chance to win this series and slam the door, and Elander probably knows that if he beats Texas, he's probably in the playoff regardless of what happens from there on out. So, you're probably in the postseason if you win that game. But if Tennessee was up by 5 or more, you're not going to win that game the next day throwing bullpen arms. And so, and Appy has still probably done enough this year to deserve to get a start at some point. So I think it's an interesting question, and I'm going to say that I probably would have tried to slide by with some of the other guys, maybe throw Rudy out there and let him go too, and then try to save Appy for the next day. And then if they score a couple and you start freaking out, then you can always bring him in.
Right. That's was 12 to 5.
12 to 5.
Yeah, I would have tried to save Appy. I would have tried to throw somebody else at 12 to 5.
I think it's easy to be sympathetic to Elander realizing, oh my gosh, I could just win the Texas series right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throw everything he had at the wall, Yep. Hindsight's probably given us a little bit of a clarity that, I don't know, in the moment, I probably would have just tried to be like, oh my gosh, we can say we beat Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on the fence with this one because I think that's a valid point, Jeff. We've said it, weeks ago. whenever Tennessee was kind of struggling a little bit after, you won the Mississippi State series and then you don't look great against Ole Miss. And it was to the point where we were saying you got to go all in on Friday, you got to go all in on Saturday. And so it's hard to be critical of Elander for going all in on Friday and
Yeah, I'm
Saturday.
I'm definitely not upset with the outcome, so I'm not critiquing him
Right.
so much as I just think it's an
Right.
interesting question.
Yeah. I think more of the issue I have is less about game script and less about strategy in terms of like, let's go for the win. And it's more about thinking about your players and how they've been performing. Appenzeller in the last couple outings
Last
has not
month.
looked, yeah, has not looked like a great bullpen guy. I mean,
Right.
frankly, I mean, he's not looked like, and obviously his fall, if he fell at all, was going to seem drastic because of how good he was. So I'm not saying he's like terrible. He's still your second best option for sure. But, given the fact that he hasn't looked great and the fact that you did have a lead, it's almost like I don't even know if I trust him. I mean, that's kind of a harsh thing to say because he's been so good in that situation. I don't even know if I trust him more than I trust like Bo Rudy in that situation. Um,
Yeah,
and so
that's
I don't
my
know.
thing is he definitely going to give you two better innings than your next best guy. And the same thing is the other side of the question is he still, even with his struggling, not a better chance to win the Sunday game than throwing a bullpen game? Because you just know he has the ability to throw a lot of pitches.
Yeah. And I think that's the key is the fact that Elander knew he knows if I throw Appenzeller now in this game where we've got a 7-run lead, if I throw him now, we're throwing our bullpen on Sunday, which means in terms of how our bullpen's been, you're going to lose
You're
that
going to
game.
lose that game.
Yeah. So you know that if you're Josh Elander, I'm going to lose Sunday if I throw Appenzeller now. I can see an argument either way, right? Where it's like, you can say, yeah, let's just go win the series now. We'll throw Appenzeller, but God forbid, if they would have come back even more than they did. I mean, they cut it to 5 when you were up, 7. And so it's like, had they come back even more, what in the world do you do if you burned Appenzeller, they win that game, and now you have the bullpen on Sunday. It's hard to be critical of Elander when we've said so many times, like,
You got to go slam the door with your best
got to go
guys.
slam the door. And I know you're not trying to be critical of him. You're just posing the question, but yeah, that's one of those things where I think in the comfort of a season where you've hit the ball consistently, it's a no-brainer. Save Appenzeller for Sunday. Let's let him start because that's going to be his role next year. So let's let him start Sunday and see how long he can go.
Yep.
But in a season where the bats have been so uncertain and your bullpen is so weak, I think I stand by the decision of throwing him on Saturday.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Because if he throws Appenzeller and they somehow come back and win that game, he at least can say, I mean, I threw the best guy, right? Like they hit my next best guy. But if you don't throw Appenzeller, if you throw Rudy out there and he gets absolutely tagged and they score 7, 8, 9 runs, then you're like, why in the heck didn't you bring in Appenzeller? So,
Yep.
Hey, I need to own that Appenzeller's fall off is my fault. I ruined that kid's season by suggesting he should be a starter, and I don't know how to undo it. But
he's gotten worse ever since.
So.
Yeah, you and Ben McKee, 2 peas in a pod.
Mississippi State's the last time he's looked like anything.
Yeah. So in light of that, the next question we have, that's a great segue, is that Appenzeller's ERA after the Mississippi State series was 1.49. After the Ole Miss series, it was 2.79. So it had gone up, over a full point. And he's had 4 outings since Ole Miss, which is seven innings total, and the ERA has gone up to 4.73, so 2 full points from that. So he's up 3 points, 3 ERA points since the Mississippi State series.
And that was a month ago, by the way.
Yep.
That was almost exactly a month ago. It was like today's May 13. I think the last time, when he threw in that Mississippi State game, it was like 4.11.
So what do you think about that? Is this like a simple situation of teams figuring out a freshman pitcher, or is this a more concerning trend for Appenzeller? Nick, you go ahead.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's some wisdom, and a lot of people say this, like it's not usually as bad as you think, and it's not usually as good as you think, but it seems really bad that in a month your ERA has gone from 1.49 to 4.73 in basically 9 outings. Since Ole Miss has been 7 innings, so that's probably something like 10 or 11 innings total. Since then, it's gone up 3 points in like 11 innings. So he has just not looked good. And so my fear is that there's something going on mentally with him. At this point, I'm just like, I hope he doesn't have the yips or something. And so I think that the verdict is still out. So I don't know that I could. I mean, this is my question, and I asked it because I was curious what y'all think, because I'm not entirely sure. But I do think obviously there just wasn't film on him in the beginning, and now there is. So I think that's part of it. But should that really, like, you have to adjust to that kind of stuff. You have to become unpredictable and, or at least less predictable. And the guy's just been very hittable, and he's not hitting his spots like he was early in the season too. So I'm on the fence on this one, but it's not good going into the postseason that your best bullpen arm is, for most of the season, is now looking like pretty pedestrian. So,
well, in other sports, you expect a freshman to hit what they would call the freshman wall in basketball. That there's something about later in the season where the physical toil becomes more than they're used to. Is that a factor for pitchers in baseball as freshmen?
Yeah. So, Jeff, what I was going to say in response to Nick's comment, which actually answers yours as well, is that I actually think that Appenzeller's problems are not mental. If I had to guess, I think his problem is fatigue. And so I think that kind of answers what you're saying, in the sense that what I see from a guy who's gone from, being the best high school baseball player on his team, that, at the plate or pitching, you've now got a guy who's consistently throwing in high leverage situations, which does have a mental fatigue to it. So that could be part of it. But I see it more as the physical, in the sense that, gearing your body up to throw in situations where the team needs me to close this game out. You're going to naturally be pushing yourself physically more than even a starter will. Starters start the game, and there's this natural pacing that they have to do.
Yeah, they're running a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. So, like, this is the problem with Chase Burns back when he was a starter for us, is that Chase Burns didn't know how to manage himself in terms of pacing himself as a starter. That's why Chase Burns was such an effective closer for Tennessee in his last year here, because Vitello was able, or Frank Anderson, whoever made the decision, ultimately probably Frank, but they were able to identify, it's evident that Chase physically is not keeping the pace he needs to be a starter, but he's got the elite stuff. And so we need to have him as a kind of closer role. And so Appenzeller, when guys have been throwing, Appenzeller's been paired with Coons most of the year. Coons has been flirting with 7 innings. Some games he's going 7, some games it's 6 and a piece, whatever. When a guy's going that deep in the game, Appenzeller, because of his skill set, is effectively your closer in that game. And so he's been, really throwing like a closer. And, one of the most infamous closers in Major League Baseball is Aroldis Chapman. Aroldis Chapman is known for, he comes in and throws to 3 batters, but because he's throwing 106, he just gets 3 straight outs, and then you're done. The game's over. It doesn't matter. And
but he couldn't throw 106 for 5 innings, 6 innings.
Exactly. Yeah. And Aroldis Chapman started off his career as a starter. And he quickly was moved to a closer for the rest of his career, because, for the same reason Chase Burns, he did not know how to physically pace himself. So I don't think in game that's necessarily a problem with Appenzeller. We haven't seen him really start a true SEC game. And so who knows if he would struggle with pacing himself throughout a long start. But I do think, to get back to the point, is that the totality of the season might be starting to take its toll on him physically. And so he doesn't have as elite of stuff as he did a month ago, because a month later he's got a lot more wear and tear on his arm than he had. And this is, college baseball obviously is a much different beast than high school baseball, even if you're playing at elite levels. And so I really think what I'm seeing, if I had to guess, would be Appenzeller physically is starting to fatigue and is starting to slow down and is less effective because of that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I also think that we should come back to that when we get to the Oklahoma series. Then I don't want to do that now, but
yeah. So yeah, Jeff, freshman wall. I mean, that's exactly what I think it is, basically. As I think that he's hitting this thing where he just physically can't do what he was doing a month ago because he's not used to throwing this much in this type of situation. So the Sunday loss was 13-6. The Vols went Johnny bullpen in this game because of the Landon Mack injury. And so, yeah, Landon Mack was out for that game, didn't start. Did you guys think that decision was, we kind of talked about this earlier with Tegan Kuhns, but do you guys think that this was Elander trying to just not push Mack in a series that he'd already won?
It's a house money play. You've got the series in the bag. You just use your bullpen guys, right?
Well, he said, though, that he knew Mack wasn't going in the pregame of the Saturday game. So is that coach speak? Is that like keeping it close to your vest? Like, yeah, we could have thrown him, or was it just he's got general arm soreness, and we're just not going to hurt a young guy's career?
The other part of that, too, is you only needed to win one game. You were really glad to win one game. So does Elander say that before the Saturday game, knowing, hey, if we lose the next two, as long as we've got Mack for Oklahoma and the SC tournament, who cares? And then you're just pleasantly surprised when the offense goes off like they do on Saturday and you win anyways. I felt like Mack could have gone if they needed him to.
Yeah, I agree. I just think they felt like they weren't up against it yet, so they don't have to throw their guys late in the season if they have a little arm soreness. When you're playing with house money. So
yeah, especially given the fact that we're about to embark on tournament play, right? SC tournament and then regional play. You're gonna be, with the state of our bullpen, you're gonna be heavily relying on starters. Starters are gonna have to go into the seventh, and you'd love for them to finish the seventh. They're going to have to go, that many innings.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to have to see 21 batters at least, you hope. And given that, I just think that Elander's trying to hedge his bet a little bit and say, let's do what we can to preserve the best guys that we have for the postseason, because I think we all agree, if our season comes down to our bullpen, whether that be in a regional or a super regional or whatever,
cooked.
this team's in for it, because the bullpen has not shown they can win you games.
Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah. A note from Sunday, another note, obviously it didn't go great, but the Reese Chapman Grand Slam was awesome. It was super epic, especially at the time. The Vols, if you didn't watch the game, we're down 4-0 at the end of the first inning, just like Saturday. They were down 3-0 at the end of the top of the first. They were down 4-0. And the fact that, Tennessee loaded the bases, then you get Grinlinger up, who flies out to shallow left. Then you get Levi Clark up, who also flies out, I think. I don't remember where. So you don't score. You had bases loaded, nobody out. You have two, solid hitters come up. Grinlinger's been your best hitter.
He's been your best hitter.
Yeah, and you have those two guys not be able to drive any runs. And so now you're thinking this team's going to do it again. They're going to flop with runners in scoring position like they've done all season. And the fact that Reese Chapman came up and hit a grand slam, it just felt like Tennessee teams of old to me. Like that felt like what you'd come to expect from a Tony Vitello team.
Yeah,
and so
gritty.
You're just fired up, right? Absolutely bouncing off the walls when Reese Chapman ties the game.
If you have any pitching, I think you stay in that game.
Yep.
Yeah. After that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so even though obviously the game ended up not mattering, because, you needed, at that point, you would have needed 9 more runs to tie what Texas was going to score. The fact that, you were able to tie the game and answer to Texas' 4-run first was a huge thing, I think. for this team in that moment. The only other thing I had about Sunday, guys, was I was really perturbed by the fact that Elander decided to throw Braden Krenzel in a game that was 7-4. When the offense has shown this weekend specifically, if no other weekend, that they could come back and score runs, that they were hitting the ball well. I have no idea why you throw Braden Krenzel with as bad as he's been.
Yeah, when you find out, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, go ahead.
He had some pretty good outings last year, if I'm remembering correctly. Can you confirm that? I think he did.
Yeah, I mean, Braden Krenzel was, people were expecting him to be one of your best bullpen arms. I mean, coming in, yeah.
He's thrown him a few times when it just doesn't make sense to me. And my only guess is we're playing with house money, and let's just see if Krenzel has it.
Or can shake the rust off.
Yeah, like every time he throws Krenzel, I'm just like, I guess he's just seeing if Krenzel can be like he was last year. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I get it, but like, you're only down 3, and it's Texas. Like, did you really think Krenzel was going to be like? I
agree with you. I'm just, why is he doing that? That's the only thing I got.
Yeah, that was really confusing to me. I mean, we said last week, like, there's not really a scenario. Like, I think I even asked, like, can you throw Krenzel at all anymore? And I think we kind of agreed, like, he shouldn't be pitching.
Can't. Yeah.
And
throw him in the midweek and see if, like, I don't know.
And then he trots him out there. I mean, I just couldn't believe we're down. I mean, I get it. We're down 3, but like, this team was hitting the ball.
In the show notes, you have 6-4. Were we even down 3?
It was 7-4. I double checked. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep. It was 7-4. And so, yeah, I just, I just didn't understand it because, I mean, Reese Chapman had just hit a grand slam a couple innings beforehand. Like, you get a couple hits, somebody hits a bomb, it's a tie game. Like, and now you're just going to give up 2. I think Krenzel giving up 3 runs. You're going to give up 3 runs because you decided to throw Braden Krenzel, and he sucked. He's been terrible. So, like, to me, it felt like concession is what it felt like. I get house money, but, like, to me, house money means, like, let's go do the crazy thing that it takes that may not be orthodox to go win the game. This felt like, hey, it's house money. Who cares? Let's forfeit. To me,
yeah, I think the house money analogy is maybe this kid can recover a little bit, and then we go with another weapon into the next series or the post game or the postseason. Maybe he's got his mojo back. I think you're just trying to see if the engine will turn over.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, Jeff. For real. I mean, I'm not, but like, I just don't agree. If that's what he was thinking, I don't agree because in that scenario, like, if you're like, hey, let's just see if the engine turns over. To me, you spin that bullet when it's like, we've used all of our arms now. It's the 9th inning against Texas. We're down 3. This is all we have left. Let's just see if we can make it happen. But like, you're in the middle innings of this game. You're only down 3. That didn't seem like the time to, like, hey, let's see if we can get Krenzel to figure it out now. To me, that's like your last resort in a series like this. At least I thought.
What do you think he was thinking?
I mean, I think what Jeff laid out is probably the most reasonable explanation. It's like, hey, we none of our. I mean, at that point, you hadn't seen Frederick. Frederick hadn't been good. At that point, you hadn't seen Bo Rudy. He was probably trying to save Bo Rudy for late game situation if you're up. But like, to me, I would put Bo Rudy in right there. It's like, I just, like, let him throw. He's your next best arm. At this point, I think if you've decided, we went all in on Friday. We threw Coons and Arvidsson. We went all in on Saturday. Maybe we didn't need to. You threw Blanco and Appenzeller. Well, let's just keep that going. Like, you threw Taylor Tracy, who I think was a good storyline, because he's like a Texas kid. He's throwing against his hometown school. Like, that's great. Start him in the game. Fine. I think they went to, was it Hindi after that?
Yep.
Yep. And so, okay, you go to Hindi, who's been up and down, but he's shown some signs of life. Makes sense. Why not throw Rudy right there? I don't understand why that's not your, like, to me, it's just top down. If you've already thrown your best four on Friday and Saturday, you're just going top down the rest of the weekend. I'm just going my next best arm, my next best arm, my next best arm, and we're just going to ride the offense as long as we can and see if we win, see if we sweep Texas. But to me, when you throw Krenzel out there in the middle innings of a Sunday game, again, it felt like conceding the game, and
At,
I didn't.
at least you're acknowledging that you're willing to lose this game.
Right. And I just didn't like that because I thought, again, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I thought for sure Tennessee was going to come back and score enough runs to win. I didn't. But you didn't give him a chance when you throw Krenzel. So.
Yep. Doesn't make sense to me either, buddy.
Yeah. So anything else from Texas before we move on to Oklahoma, boys?
Just this.
Cool. So the Vols will travel to Oklahoma tomorrow to take on the Sooners. These are Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. The Thursday and Friday games are at 5:30 Central Time. The Saturday games at 2 p.m. Central Time. All games are on SC Network Plus. Oklahoma has played Arizona State, LSU, Texas, Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. Those are the common opponents that we have between them. They played 2 games against Arizona State. They split those. They won 2 out of 3 against Texas. They got swept by Texas. They won 2 out of 3 against LSU. They got swept by Texas. They lost 2-1 against Bama. They won 2-1 against Vandy, and they swept Missouri. So that comes out to a grand total of a 9-8 record against these common opponents that Tennessee has. Tennessee, in those same games against those same teams, has an 8-8 record. So the difference is that one extra win against Arizona State that Oklahoma would have. What does hearing that do for you? Jeff, you go first.
It doesn't do anything for me because I don't understand this team.
Yeah. Remember when I laid out the Kentucky scenario in the same way, you were surprised because Kentucky had a better record than Tennessee, and obviously that series didn't go well. And we've seen Tennessee's trend that Nick pointed out last week of, Tennessee playing to level their competition, playing better against better teams, worse against worse teams. Does the fact that this team seems similar in record, they're worse in the standings, does that make you feel worried?
I appreciate how serious you're being right now, and that makes all the sense in the world to me, but I can't speak rationally about this team. I have decided that I have the power to control this team. So I destroyed Appenzeller by calling for him to start. I cursed us by saying we'd sweep Kentucky. I gave us the Texas victory by saying Texas would sweep us. And so I'm in control. I know how to I'm going to use my powers for good. But if you ask me to rationally evaluate the team, I have nothing to offer you.
Touche. Nick, does hearing their record and hearing ours, does that do anything for you?
Not really. I mean, I think we're a better baseball team in Oklahoma, but I just think we haven't shown that when we play inferior opponents. So, I mean, don't we have the same exact record overall as them in the SEC?
That's a great question. It's probably close.
I think we're both like 500, right at it.
Yeah, Tennessee's one game below 500. I know that, 13-14.
Okay, I think they're either 13-14 or 14-13, one or the other. And so, no, I mean, I've thought about that. I looked at the show notes earlier, and I can't. There's nothing that pops in my head that makes me feel much of anything by knowing that we're about the same record wise.
Yeah. So we kind of addressed this earlier, and Nick, don't let me forget what you wanted to cover in the Oklahoma section.
Yep.
But the Vols need to win one game. That's what at least we had mapped out. Do we still agree with that? Nick, you kind of already touched on this earlier. What do you think?
I'm sticking with my early season prediction that 13 wins is enough to get you in. When you have an RPI that's 30 or higher, we're right there. And I think that we are in. I think
even if we get swept.
Yeah, I think being Texas got you in. I don't want to test that, by the way. I'm hoping that we don't have to come back and decide whether I'm right or wrong. I hope we win at least one game.
Yeah. I mean, this is meaningless, really. But I just would really like to see us finish 500 or better.
Yeah.
So I would really like to see Tennessee win this series.
Mhm.
Just that way you can say, because if you go 2-1, that means you finish 15-15. And I think that's fine. I think that's fine for what this team has gone through and for what well, I should say at the beginning of the season I would have said that's fine. Probably a little underwhelming, but it's fine. Now I'm saying that's actually probably pretty good. Based on what this team has gone through. The fact that you finished 500 in SEC play, I'm still not as confident as you are, Nick. I think if in theory Tennessee were to get swept by Oklahoma tomorrow, this weekend, that you got to win in Hoover at that point. I'm still kind of convinced that you're going to need to at least win one more game, whether that be against Oklahoma or against whoever you see in the first round of the tournament. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I think they're in.
Okay.
Yep, I'm sticking to it. So I'm hoping we don't have to test that. I don't want to really find out, but I do think that they're in.
Yeah. So, guys, given this series, given Coons' arm soreness, Mac was sore last week, how would you, if you were Elander, how would you manage the arms this weekend? What would you do if you were calling the shots?
How would I manage the arms if I was calling the shots? Coons has arm soreness. I'm probably throwing Blanco, and then I'm probably going Arvidsson on Friday or on Thursday.
So you're gonna bump up Blanco. So that would be 2 days less rest than usual.
Well, Mac didn't throw, assuming. Well, is Mac going to throw this weekend?
Hey, hold up. I said Coons had arm soreness. It's not. It's Mac. So Coons is not there's no news about him having arm soreness. It's Mac that's day to day.
Okay.
You throw Coons, right? I mean,
that was the case last weekend too. I thought you were breaking that earlier that Coons had soreness, which was new news.
Okay.
No.
Gotcha.
It's Mac.
Then this is a lot easier. Then I'm throwing Coons and I'm throwing Arvidsson on Friday.
And by Friday, you mean Thursday?
Yes, Dad burn.
No, so I agree. So now that the Coons discussion is off the table, Coons Thursday, obviously don't fix what's, don't mess with what's not broken. Coons looked great last weekend. If you throw Coons on Thursday, if you throw Coons tomorrow, you might win that game by scoring 2 or 3. You don't have to score that if he looks like he did against Texas. It's not like you're going to have to put up a Herculean performance on offense to win that game against a team like Oklahoma. So if Coons is on again, there's no way that you're going to lose if you score a few runs. So, I think that's obvious, right? Coons, and then come out of the bullpen with Arvidsson whenever you need him on Thursday. Friday, given the fact that that Blanco is obviously still good, you would go with Blanco on Friday, I assume?
Yeah.
Now, I think this is where it gets interesting. So let's say you throw Coons on Thursday, and you follow him up with Arvidsson out of the bullpen, and you win that game. So you've already won the one game that maybe you need to win and maybe you don't, but you've already won a game. I think it's still obvious pitch Blanco on Friday. What I think gets interesting is, do you throw Appenzeller in relief on Friday, regardless of the score? You're up, you're down, whatever. If you've already won Thursday, do you throw Appenzeller in relief on Friday?
No.
Why?
So that he can get more rest for postseason if he's truly fatigued, so that he can have just a whole week off.
Yeah. I think I would agree with you that I would not throw Appenzeller on Friday. I would like to see Elander start Appenzeller in the SEC tournament game. Because obviously you're not going to throw Coons on, what would that be, 4 days rest on a Tuesday game in the SEC tournament. You could maybe throw Mac if he doesn't throw on Saturday. You could maybe start him in that game if you let him rest that whole time. But I also think I would rather start Mac, or not Mac. Yeah, I would start Mac on Saturday because I want him to get back in the rotation of what's it like to pitch on the weekend. So if he can go, I'd like to see him go on Saturday. but I think Appenzeller is in a prime position right now where he's kind of been struggling. And if the SC tournament, if we win a game against Oklahoma, the SC tournament doesn't really matter at that point. I think it would be a great opportunity to try and fix Cam Appenzeller and throw him in a game where, it'd be nice to win, but you don't need it in the SC tournament. Because to me, if you throw your 3 starters over the weekend, then you don't have any and you throw Arvidsson and you throw Appenzeller, that means you're starting somebody random. Maybe Blaine Brown. Who knows? So I think if you win on Thursday and you can throw Appenzeller to start the SC tournament, I think that's huge.
I'm here for that. That sounds like an interesting scenario. Now, what's the gap between? Help me remember, Mac. What's the gap between? Like, let's say Appenzeller throws and you lose. What's the gap? Or if you win, doesn't matter. What's the gap between the end of the SEC tournament and then your regional?
Yeah. So if he throws on Tuesday and he starts that game, and let's just say he goes long enough, let's say he goes 7 innings, win or lose, doesn't matter. He goes 7 innings. Then you're looking at a little over a week of rest before. So the SC tournament starts on Tuesday and the SC championship game is on Sunday. Yep. And then your regional is it starts that following like Thursday or Friday, depending on the seeding.
So you got about 10 days.
Yeah.
Something like that, 9 or 10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would have plenty of time.
Yeah, with that much rest, I would be comfortable with that. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, that's just something I was, pondering.
Like you said, if you win on Thursday, then it's definitely all house money, right? Because I think we're in anyways. You win on Thursday, you're definitely in. Like you just beat Texas. You went and won. You got the 14 wins. Your RPI is at 30. Like there's no way you're not getting in at that point. You're a lock.
Yeah, yeah. And I think if you do win Thursday, if Mac has any bit of lingering soreness, you're not going to see him at all in the weekend.
Yeah, totally agree with that too.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's a possibility that Elander doesn't throw Blanco if you win Thursday?
That he doesn't throw Blanco?
Does he throw off the entire weekend? And by throw off, I mean not put his best pitchers out there. Does he intentionally not throw Blanco, Mac, Appenzeller, fill in the blank on the Friday and Saturday subsequently because you won Thursday? Or is he going to throw some of those guys?
I guess it just depends on what he wants to do on Tuesday. So if he does want to throw Appenzeller, like you said, but if he wants to, I don't know, does he want to throw Blanco or Mac on Tuesday?
Yeah. Yeah,
Jeff just ninja vanished on my screen.
He's like, they're talking about baseball. Who cares?
I'll let y'all a note in the chat, you friggers.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think this weekend has a chance to be really interesting in terms of I think you're going to find out how important the SC tournament is to Josh Elander. If you see Coons on Thursday, followed by Arvidsson to finish the game. Then you see Blanco on Friday, followed by Appenzeller to finish the game. Then you see Mac on Saturday. If you see that, I think Elander is signaling I don't give a crap about the SC tournament. All we care about is regional play, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, honestly.
I don't either because Josh Elander has been with this baseball team long enough to go to 3 College World Series, and no one cares about through all those runs, I cannot remember what we did year to year in the SEC tournament, and I do not care.
Well, I can tell you, we won the SEC tournament in 2022.
In 22, I know we won it, but
we also won it in 24.
It's more of a rhetorical point to say I don't care.
In 23, we lost to Bama.
I don't care about any of that.
Yeah. I don't know.
Gun to my head, I could have told you we won it in 22 because it's 22, but the rest of it, I could have. Who cares?
And last year we lost to Vanderbilt, if you care, which you don't.
I don't care. And I don't care who we play next Tuesday and if we lose.
I still have this sentimental connection to the SC tournament. I want to play well in the SC tournament. I can't. I can't get past it.
I always want to play well, but I just don't care if we lose as long as we're got a chance. As long as we make the super and my prediction is correct for this year, then
that's all you care about is being right, baby.
I just want to be right.
Oh my gosh.
I
Jeff,
want you guys to be more right because you guys said that Omaha was was the goal
what's our
for
goal?
this year. So
What's the goal? Yep. Yep. I stand by that. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
it should have
it's a
been.
I think
reasonable
you,
goal.
I would not suspect that you wouldn't stand by. I'm saying I genuinely hope that we reach your goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think we
I
will. I think we're going to make a super and lose, but
yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. Jeff, I'm curious, like as someone, you always are saying you don't know as much as us, which I don't think is as true as you make it out to be. But um, what like given what you've heard Nick and I say, what is your lean on like how would you manage these guys? Like if we win Thursday, would you still throw, your better arms over the weekend or would you rather Elander just kind of ride off the series and try and play well
be
in the
careful
SC
with your
tournament?
powers. Be careful with your powers.
Yeah. So again, I really mean this. Y'all know the bullpen much better than I do. I thought what Mac laid out. This is boring podcasting, but I thought what Mac laid out made a ton of sense. And so I don't know how to. I don't know what alternative to throw against it. I just thought it was a compelling argument. So, like our Airbnb for Texas Tech, I vote with Mac.
Texas A&M.
I mean Texas A&M. Sorry, it's late. It's 2010. Papa's tired.
Yeah. Zero interest in going to Texas Tech.
Yeah, for sure.
Zero? Really?
Well, not zero, but not
How about
much.
no interest in paying to go to Texas Tech?
Not much
One of
interest.
those
That's
little
fair.
guys fly us out there? Sure.
Yeah, yeah. All right, boys. Well, let's get into it. Predictions, expectations, Oklahoma series. Jeff, why don't you kick us off, man, with your powers?
So this is what's going to happen, guys. This is a letdown series because you just got done beating Texas and you're riding high. This is a team that is comparable to you, but certainly not comparable to Texas in terms of their prestige. And so this team plays down to their competition. They're also coming off, it's sort of a trap game because you're coming off such a high for Texas. And so what's going to happen is these guys are not going to come in locked in the way they need to. They're going to lose 2 games, one of which by a run rule, and then they might pick up a win on Sunday.
Okay. That will be impressive considering they're not playing on Sunday. Nicholas, what do you think?
Saturday, you player. You
I know.
pedantic.
I know. Seriously. I know. It's unbelievable.
Golly.
It's unbelievable.
They will lose the 3rd game of the series.
I had to. I just had to.
I know. I've met you.
Nick, what do you got, man?
I've had a really hard time with this one. I feel like I usually have a good beat on what I think will happen.
Not me.
Yeah. And like I said last week, I would not be shocked if they beat Texas, and they did. I really wasn't surprised. I was surprised the way they won on Saturday, the way they hit like that. But, I mean, I think they're going to win one. And the thing that makes the most sense is Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I think it's possible they win that series, but man, I've struggled with this, and now I'm up against it. I've been thinking for all week, how am I going to pick this? Because I don't like being wrong. But I'm going to say we win Thursday and Friday.
Nice. I think Tennessee's only going to win one. I think they will drop this series. And I actually think the Blanco game is the one that we're going to win. So I'm assuming that's going to be Friday, and I think that's the game we'll win. I think Coons will have a down-to-earth kind of outing, and Oklahoma's going to be hungry to win that game. I think Thursday you're going to drop, assuming that Coons pitches. I think you drop that game because Oklahoma's going to be on, and Coons is not going to be bad, but I think he's just going to be more normal. And then I think Tennessee locks in for Friday, and they understand like, okay, we got to win one, and we're probably not going to win Saturday because of our bullpen. So let's go get it right now. And I think Friday's the game you win. So, all right, guys. Well, good podcast. Nick, tell them where they can find us.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on Twitter at volatile_1998. That is where, for you Texas fans, we assume that Schlossnagle will be listening to this week because, he has a terminal illness when he faces those boys in orange, as Max said earlier.
That's right. Remember, guys, it's terminal.